Hey guys, welcome back to part 2 of this sci-fi floor material in Substance Designer and Substance Painter. So, we're in Substance Designer right now, taking a look at what we just did in the last video. And I realized I'm not sure there's enough detail on this yet in the height map. So, even though I said this video would be all in Substance Painter, I might actually go back and throw in just a little bit more detail, but I didn't want to do it off camera just so there wasn't some massive changes off camera for this material. So what I'm going to do is put in one more blend and I think a capsule. Okay, so I'll make that pattern specific. Let me just make sure we're recording really quick. Okay, cool. Okay, so I'll throw in that capsule. And it's not exactly right yet, so I'll have to transform it really quick. But I want to preview this shape here. Okay, it's still a little too big. Okay, and we'll just throw it right there. And we don't want any tiling. Okay, no tiling. So now we have this nice shape here. And maybe make it even number. Okay, that's not bad. Okay, I wonder if I even want it to be a capsule. I know I said I did, but okay, I'll keep the capsule. But let's try just a rectangle. And I'll scale it down just a little, mainly on the Y, I think. Okay, I think that looks better. And I'll blend it with a capsule though. Put the subtract. Or with an add. I might just go with a copy actually and get a mix of both. Like that maybe. I could use a little less scale. Okay. Yeah, like that. And I want to bevel this a little. Negative 0.01. It's not enough. Negative 0.03. Still don't like it all that much. Okay. Well, this is gonna be a little bit more complex than I thought. But I'm gonna blend it with this polygon right here. Do a transform node. And going to subtract, I think, the inverse. So we'll do invert grayscale. Okay, yeah, so I'm going to subtract the invert of that after the bevel though. Or no, before the bevel. Okay. And this is going to need a transform node now, and everything's getting a little smushed together. Try to separate that out. Okay, so that's gonna need a transform node. So I'll rotate this 180 degrees. You can see it's looking really small. So the shape is going to need a transform node. Okay, cool. Okay, there it is right there. We don't want tiling again. We usually don't want tiling. And this is gonna have to be a little bit bigger now. Okay, cool. Now I just want to mess around with changing these a little bit and seeing what we can do. We can also change the opacity of the subtract node in general to make this detail a little more faint. But I think it's good, prominent like that. Alright, so we basically have our perfected shape. Or as perfect as it's going to get. So make one more frame for that. Call that, I don't know, design, whatever. We're done with this, basically. So there's our final height map, ambient occlusion, and normal. So we'll click this wrench icon here. Actually, we need a folder for it first. So I'm gonna make a new folder called 4x4 sci-fi interlocking floor, just what it is. And I'm gonna make two folders within it. One for the HDRP export because I'm exporting it for HDRP in Unity, but if it was Unreal Engine, just call it Unreal export, whatever. And one for the designer export. Okay. So just hit the wrench icon, export outputs to whatever folder you chose, but for me, it's going to be the designer export. Okay, so export those. I'm working in 2K right now, so it's just going to be a 2K export, but that's fine. So open up Blender next, or I guess you can do this in almost any modeling software, but what I'm going to be using is the displacement modifier. So the material was a 4x4 material, so I just scaled the shape up by 2. So now if we look in the dimensions, it's a 4x4 meter plane. And I'm going to click on the wrench, add a new modifier, and it's going to be a displacement modifier. So we'll find a new texture from our computer, and that is going to be, you're going to use the height map, and nothing's going to happen yet really. Okay, I actually looked at, that was the wrong height map. It is going to be this height map. Okay. And now we're going to apply some subdivision surface modifiers so we can actually see what's going on. Okay, a couple more. Okay, probably right there. So this plane is at 2 million triangles right now, so that should be enough. And in the displacement modifier for texture coordinates, we'll use the UV coordinates. So this is the shape that we have. And for the strength, maybe I will do 0.1. And it looks like it could be subdivided one more time because it looks a little sharp. So we'll change that to simple. And when we're working with 8 million triangles, it's going to take a little bit longer. I'm going to switch the order of these two modifiers so that the subdivision happens before the displacement. So that way it's more accurate to our texture. Okay. So cool. So we have this all figured out. I might be able to go less than 0.1 in the strength, but we'll just have to see how it bakes out in the end. So I'm going to take this mesh, export it as an FBX or whatever you want really. So we'll do mesh selected objects, and I'll export this into here, call it displacement plane high poly, because that's what it is. It's a high poly model. So that's going to take a second. So while that's happening, I'll just open up Substance Painter. But yeah, it does take a little while. Okay. All right, so I guess while we're waiting, I'm going to take a quick look through the smart materials to see what I might want to use. And I'm thinking I'll probably use the steel dark aged, just from the look of it. And I need some type of plastic. So, okay, maybe this plastic glossy actually. Yeah, I think that would look pretty high tech. Okay, so this is done exporting. So I'll just rename it high poly plane. And now we also need the low poly version. So I'll shift A, add another plane, scale 2, because it has to be the same size. And we'll fix the transforms. And then we'll go into the UVs. And you can see in the UV editing, in this window, that's the UVs that we'll be working with. So it covers the entire UV island. So with that being said, this will make a nice tiling material, and that's what we're going for. So we can basically just repeat this over and over, this texture, and it will tile. So that's the logic behind this tiling material. So cool. We'll have to export this, which should be extremely fast. So just 4x4 plane. Okay. So we'll create a new file. Oh, I had a 4x4 plane just floating around there too. I make a lot of 4x4 planes. Okay, so I have a lot of folders here. But no, what we want is this 4x4 plane. All right, cool. And in the resources, I'm going to add the designer exports. I don't need all of them, but I'll just add all of them. And we're going to set them all as textures, and we only need it for this project. So import your resources to current session. Okay, so I'm going to delete this layer. Add a new fill layer. I'll call it designer exports, and for now, I'm probably only going to use the AO. So in texture set settings, I'm going to add the ambient occlusion channel, activate that here, and drop in the AO. Okay. And I'm going to save this before something crashes when we bake out this material. So where is it? It's right here. Just call it the same thing. All right, cool. And in texture set settings, we will go to bake mesh maps. We'll bake a 2K map, and the high definition mesh will select this displacement plane high poly, and we'll bake mesh maps. And this is basically a view of everything we're baking. It does the normal world space, ID, ambient occlusion, curvature, thickness, and that's how you basically use all these plugins to generate your smart materials and smart maps and things like that in Substance Designer. But this is a good view of if we're actually baking everything. You can see it's not actually getting everything, which means our high poly mesh might have been a little too high. But here everything looks fine. So I'll just run with this. It usually doesn't work first try, so pretty glad about that. So that's cool. Okay. So now that we have that, I'm going to go into Smart Materials and drag out Steel Dark. And what other one did I say? Plastic Glossy. Okay, cool. And it looks like this AO is in the right spot. That's cool. Okay. So let's hide the plastic glossy, and now it's time to sort of customize these smart materials and just play around with them a little bit. So it was looking a little too dark, so I want to make the metal color lighter, and we can change the roughness too. I think something a little less rough and a little more shiny. Okay, maybe like that. Now for the plastic glossy, we'll change the base. Something a little like yellowy white. Maybe something like that. And especially for a clean spaceship hallway, the dust is a little much. So I'll lower that, just so it's only noticeable a little bit. And the stains, I'll lower a little bit. Okay, cool. So we'll collapse that. So the Steel Dark Age should be first. So I'm going to add a black mask to that now. So now we can actually use these brushes to paint on it exactly where we want to. And I know you could do all this in Substance Designer, but I just like working with smart materials. So I do it here. I know I have to hand paint a lot of stuff, which probably wastes time. And it's definitely a lot easier in Substance Designer. But there's just something to being artistic. And there's something to be said about smart materials for sure. I feel like they add more realism than just what you can do in Substance Designer alone, or at least it would be a lot more work to recreate that in Designer. So even though I have to go around and paint all these edges, and I know Designer could do that very quickly, just with a couple, like just taking the shapes and plugging them into the opacity slot of a blend and then blending two colors together. I just like doing this. It doesn't even take very long either. Alright, cool. So we're on to the last panel already. Alright, so it's not perfect. Definitely isn't perfect, but we can go back, fix a lot of this very quickly. Okay, looking for more mistakes. It is a little tedious. And I think you could also do this faster using a color ID mat. I've never really gotten into those, but I think I will try in the future because it can save a lot of time with making masks. So I will look into that probably. Okay, so we have all the edges done. So now I can go in and paint all these with a bigger brush. Alright, so not too bad. It would be convenient to be able to use a mirror modifier here, or this symmetry tab, I mean. But with these tiles constantly rotating, that's not going to work. But in most cases, that would be nice. Alright, cool. So I'll just go in and paint in the final tiles. Alright, nice. So that's the most simple mask so far done. And a lot of making materials in this workflow is iteration. So as I look at this, I realize there's another key detail in Designer that I actually missed. So now I'm going to have to save this and go back into Designer and add in that final shape that it's not necessary, but that this material probably could have benefited from. So I'm going to add in one more shape. It's going to have a bevel. Make it small, like -0.01. And I just want to copy this on top, is all, at an extremely low opacity. And it's definitely gonna need a transform before I bevel it. Okay, so I'll go into the transform. And what I want to do is make a smaller tile within this main one. So pretty simple. And it should probably just be a little smaller. It's hard to see, but okay, that seems fine. Only thing is I feel like it should be bigger. But it's going to get in the way of the capsules for sure. I feel like it should really be out here. But I don't want to move these capsules. don't know, maybe I could just leave it like that. I don't think it's going to be a huge deal. I could shrink it in just a tiny bit. Make it go more like that. Also, we have this weird line here. I don't know what that's from. Oh, okay, that's because we have tiling on. Okay, cool. So yeah, that's pretty much exactly what I wanted. I just feel I don't want to move the capsules, but I feel like I probably should. Okay, you know what? I think that's fine right there. Okay, so let's go ahead, hit the wrench icon, and export these one more time. So we'll go back into Blender, turn on this high poly map again, and okay, that's not what I want. Okay, so I'll swap this out. Okay, where did I export this to? I exported to the designer export. Okay. Alright, so I'll take the height, this new height, and hopefully it still works. Okay, yeah, so you can see we have this little bump here now. Okay, cool. So this is going to be re-exported as the new displacement map high poly. And while I wait on that, we'll do some more masking. So I'll turn on symmetry now, because these clips are symmetrical. Or at least they should be. Okay, if I did my job right, they'd be symmetrical. So, okay, cool. And I'll go around and just paint in these clips metal. And I can even paint on this as well. But I actually don't like doing that. I like sort of actually manipulating the plane and actually painting on the real geometry versus the UVs. It especially helps when the geometry is not flat like this. But honestly, this normal map is really convincing. And it actually feels like the geometry has some weight to it. Or like at least some tessellation behind it. But it really doesn't. It's just flat. But it doesn't look it. So that's good. Painter definitely bakes very good normals if you do it right. So that's cool. Alright, let's see if this is exported. And it is. Okay, so we'll bake the new mesh textures with this new displacement plane. So that should not take too long because we already did it once and it's only 2K resolution. But actually, maybe because I used a new model, it will take just as long. Alright, it's chugging through. Alright, cool. Okay, so there it is with this new bump on top. And that's exactly what I wanted. Okay, so I'm thinking about making this metal too. But I don't know. I think I should probably erase that. Alright, cool. Alright, so I'll only keep the handle as metal, but I am going to have to go through and paint in these bolts. So small brush. Maybe a little bigger than that, maybe 3. Okay, 3 works. Okay, and that looks pretty nice. Okay, next I'm thinking we'll get rid of the metal in all of these capsules. But then I'll have to paint it back on the bolts. And when we do this, since every tile is different, you have to make sure to turn off symmetry. And I don't know how I messed up there. There's 2 little dots on this, that of 2 dots of metal that I did not mean to paint. Yet they're still there. I don't know what that was. Okay, cool. So that's a good start. Next, I want all of these to not have metal as well. All these panels that stick out. So okay, it's 2 down. You can see how you can like quickly make cool designs and stuff with with Painter. Which is why I like it so much, because you're literally just painting. It's very easy. It's very intuitive too. Designer is not so intuitive. You sort of have to know what blend modes will do what in order to give you like a certain result you have in mind. But I feel like you can just play around a lot more in Painter. And I like that. Okay, cool. So I'll just leave it at that for now. And I'm going to go back to filling and paint in these bolts within every capsule. this might actually be a good time to use the UVs a little bit faster. Alright, now I'll go back to erasing the metal, and we'll delete all the interiors of these cubes. Okay, switch to bigger brush, speed stuff up. Okay. So starting to look pretty good. Turn the grayscale back up to quickly paint in these. So I might grab an alpha here. I'm just looking for something like that. Turn the grayscale up, right? Okay. So what I can do is make the height enough and just go like that. Sort of like douse this whole thing in metal, and from far enough away it looks fine. So this absolutely isn't as precise as doing it all in Substance Designer, but it's fine. And I think in the end it might even be better. Okay, and I'll switch back to the normal brush, the hard brush, because I think I went a little too overboard right there. Alright, cool. So that's the basics of it. Now I'm going to go into a little more detail. So when I want to add roughness variation for sci-fi, there's one cool, just a basic material I use, the aluminum insulator. So I'll scale it up quite a bit, add a black mask. I'm going to copy this mask of the steel dark aged, paste it into this mask. Okay, cool. And invert it. And now I'll erase everything I don't want. Okay, that's adding. Nope. That's better. And I just hope I don't miss anything. But I do want to keep these inside squares. Okay, so we're almost done here. Okay, that's good. Now I'm just going to have to clean up the rest of the capsules. Okay, so that's good. Okay, accept these. I just hope I don't mess up after I export and realize something was wrong. Okay, so everything seems to be fine. So now I'm going to look at this from some good lighting. I'm going to get rid of the color, the metal, and the height. So now we're only working with roughness. I'll make the roughness pretty low, the roughness border pretty low as well. But now we have some nice, a cool roughness pattern going along. All right, nice. Okay, so I'm thinking what I want to do next. Okay, I might make something called bumps. Bump up the height all the way. We don't need anything else. Add a black mask. And I really just feel like these could use some more detail. So that's all I'll be doing. Because I didn't want to go overboard in Designer, especially when you can add a lot of cool details right here in Painter. Okay, I'll make another layer, just a regular layer, called normals. And I'll go into hard surfaces and drag this circle button into normals. I haven't like practiced any of this. I'm just going off of what I feel might look good, trying things out. So I want to put these in each corner of this large capsule. Okay, that's not bad. There's a little metal there. I don't know why. Alright, so more normals maybe? Maybe a handle. Yeah, maybe a handle on two opposite sides. And maybe a different handle inside these capsules. So it's hard to tell when you're doing too much because you don't want to go overboard. So I feel like I might stop here with any height or normal details. And I'll make a new fill layer called red paint. So the only thing I want to adjust is the color. Set it to red. add a black mask. In the alphas, I'll grab like an arrow or something. I basically just grab whatever I saw first. And maybe paint some of these panels. Okay, that could not have been any more crooked. But it looks fine. So I'll paint like the opposite panels. So if every panel looks the same, even though they're not all repeating, it will look repeating. And you don't want it to look like you just copied the same panel everywhere. There should be some variations. Okay, what's next? I don't know, that might be enough for that. So I might move on to like some line stripes. Maybe just do a couple. Maybe one in that handle. And one this one. And that could be it. So I'll make a new folder called Painted Details. Drop anything I painted into here. Make a new folder called Base. Separate from Painted Details. Grab all that. Throw it in there. Okay, and now the final folder will be called Smart Masks, which is, no, maybe Smart Materials. So we'll drop in a fill layer, find a smart mask, and use sand. So you can see it uses all of the mesh maps we got from the high poly mesh, like curvature, thickness, all that, world space normals, and it uses that to sort of find where the sand might accumulate in the model. So we can make some sand, you know, but that's not what I'm using this for. I'm using this sort of just to find the dark spots. So I'll use just the black color, just darken a little bit, just like that. And I know that's what AO is for, and we have AO, but I like doing this too. And now I'll use occlusion strong. And do the same thing, but this time with like a dirtier color. And this time it will also affect the roughness channel too. So I want to make it pretty rough. Really tone down the color, but just enough that it's seen. Maybe I don't want to affect the roughness actually, not at this point, because occlusion strong is pretty strong. So, and next I want to grab stain scratches, I think it's called, so you can see we get scratches on the texture. I want to not affect the metallic, but do I want to turn the roughness up or down? Is the question. I guess the more reflective the better. Looks more like a metal scratch. And the color, just a little bit. 50 might even be too much. Okay, cool. See, I ended up going with 43, if you can't see that. And now I want some dirt spots. So we'll go with like a dirtier color. a washed out dirty color. We don't want to affect metal. We do want to affect rough, and I'll make that very rough. And lower the opacity. Maybe that's a little too rough. From a certain perspective, you can see a little too much. Maybe halfway. So you can see Designer gave us a lot of the nice shapes, but Painter helped us really to turn it into a much more detailed texture than I could have quickly in Designer. The thing is, you can do anything in Designer, but it takes time. And Painter really helps you to do it quickly just by painting things. So we added more normals and a little more height detail in certain spots, which I realized I forgot to paint painted detail should be on top, but I forgot to paint some of these bumps, so let me do that quickly. But yeah, so using Painter just speeds up your workflow. I added in a lot of these decals that would have taken quite a while to do in Designer. And yeah, so I'll save this quickly before I lose all my progress. And we'll just quickly take a look at it in iRay. It looks pretty good. So this is what it could look like in your game. And it holds up. So yeah, you can see a lot of these roughness, imperfections, some scratches, dirt, all the stuff we added, some paint. You can even chip away at the paint a little bit. Just a lot of wear, you know? It makes it look used. And that's part of texturing, you know, trying to tell a story with your model. Even though it's sci-fi, doesn't mean it has to be perfectly clean, but you also have to make sure you're not going overboard, which is why I toned down a lot of the opacities a little bit, because if I didn't, it would look extremely dirty. So it looks clean in sci-fi from far away, but the closer you get, you can really start to tell that, you know, it was used before. People did walk on it. And so yeah, you need to pay attention to your texturing and use texturing to try to tell a story. So especially for my game, it was important that it wasn't too dirty, but that it's also not extremely clean either. So yeah, I think this works out. So from here, I will go to File, Export Textures, and I'm going to export it to the HDRP export. And it's still in 2K because everything in this whole project was in 2K. And for the configuration, this is the most important part. So for instance, if you were using Arnold, you would just pick Arnold 5, for instance. Or if you were in the Unity standard, you might use standard metallic. For the, I think it's called the universal render pipeline now, or Unreal, just Unreal Engine 4. But I'm going to be using HDRP. And I think at one point you actually had to make your own export channels for HDRP, but Painter has its own HDRP configuration now, so that's pretty cool. So it's really easy. And I'll just export that. It should only be 3 maps for HDRP. So the albedo or base color, the mask map, which has ambient occlusion, metallic, all that, and then the normal. So that's what I'll be using in my game. So yeah, anyways, that's it for this tiling texture. So thank you for watching, guys. This has been fun, for sure. And yeah, so usually it probably wouldn't take me this long, but I was explaining a couple things along the way. But making this material was actually pretty fast. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I helped you to learn something new about Designer Painter, and I'll be experimenting with some more programs in the future as well too. So thank you for watching and stay tuned for more videos.